Welcome, this is Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis. Today we're going to talk about numbers, and numbers matter because they are, as Scripture says, a reflection of the divine mind. They signify to us the proportions and structures that the Creator put into the created order on purpose. And so we really get an idea of the fact that the world is made. It's not chaotic, it's not happenstance. There's a fundamental fabric and structure that is signified in numbers, geometry, proportion, symmetry, etc. And the best way to start in this question, this issue, is to look at the tetractys of Pythagoras, which is a little pyramid of 10 dots. And for Pythagoras, the tetractys is built up into, it's what builds up into the 10 primary numbers, right? 1 through 10, the decad. Unity, if we start with 1, the monad, you could say unity is what gives us the idea of classing all things together. And when we speak of 1, we're immediately talking about something universal. We're immediately hearkening to something that is a metaphysical principle uniting all things. It's an absolute. It's not something that just exists in the mind. It's a real metaphysical conception of, in some way, all things are connected. They all have some origin or some sense of existence and subsistence. The 1 also brings to mind the notion of God, or the source from which all essences, all oneness flows. The 1 is, you could say, a kind of beginning point, but it is also the end point, because all things don't just arise from the 1, they also appear to be moving towards some telos, some purpose, some omega point, we could say. And so oneness or unity is a way of binding all things together. Doesn't mean that all things are only 1. That would be a dialectical trap. But it does mean that all things ultimately do have a metaphysical, an ontological connection to one another. And so this is not something that humans just create as a social construct. It's a real principle in the world. This is how we can speak of things like universals in logic or in propositions. It's how we can speak of things like an absolute, concrete absolute when it comes to metaphysics. It's how we can speak of universal moral principles, something being wrong or right. It relates directly to the concept of 1. Now, from the monad, just speaking in terms of numbers, numericals here, we get a secondary principle. If you were to take a point and you drew a line, you would get, and stop at another point, you would have a dyad. 2 points make a line. And this speaks to us of duality. We see in the world a kind of polarization between forces that are in contradistinction. Doesn't mean they're in dialectical tension. It just means that they complement one another, or they're in distinction from one another. Male, female, night, day. This is something that appears all throughout nature. We see this in Far Eastern religions who kind of absolutize this concept of the dyad and make it into something as a universal metaphysical principle, when really it's just a reflection of things that are apparent in nature itself. To the Pythagoreans, the number 2 was the first sexed number, and even considered to be, in a way, female. Right, left, male, female, moving and rest, forward, backwards, up, down. Everything seemed to, in nature, kind of, again, have this dyadic principle to it. Sun and moon, right? That's what rules the celestial sphere in terms of day and night. And then we move to the triad. If we take those 2 points and we put another point, we have a triangle. And the triad is a relation of opposites that transcends opposition. So it takes the dyadic principle and it moves it into a higher relation of symmetry through synthesis. Now, we're not speaking of God here. We're speaking of numbers in the natural world. So we're not trying to read too much about our Trinitarian doctrine into numbers as they relate to the natural world or to the universe. But a triangle is the first instance of giving us a flat plane, not an airplane, plane. So we went from the point to another point, that's a line, and if we have another point and we draw those lines, that's a triangle, and that's the beginning of a plane. It's a third level, a leg of balance, you could say. And we see that the triangle, the Trinity, is a most simple structural device. It's the first polygon that defines a flat surface. If you think of the Vesica Pisces, this is formed by two overlapping circles, immediately invoking a triangle. So again, if we have a cylinder, if we have a sphere, if we have a cube, this again we can build up these relationships of harmonies or geometric principles and forms into structures that will eventually give us what will be called Platonic solids in the philosophy of Plato from the Timaeus. And this is relevant because we see that actually all of nature is built up from these kind of fundamental solids and structures. And again, it shows us that nature has telos, it has obvious design in it. And it's not just an impersonal design. We know from information science that design information actually always comes from some conscious source. It doesn't originate from an unconscious, impersonal, meaningless, chaotic source. So 3 is also, again, relates to like Archimedes, again, with the cone, the sphere, and the drum, that they're all ratios of 2 and 3. And these are, again, basic geometric forms. When we move to the quaternity, to 2 pairs, this is where we have the realm of manifestation, we could say. 4 is the firstborn thing from the process of procreation of 2 2s. The tetrad is thus the first square number other than 1, right? So we went from 1, and then we got 2 and 3, and then now 4 is more similar to 1, and is typically a symbol of earth, right? Because of its 4 corners of the earth in Scripture, and it's a plane. 4 is the basis of all 3-dimensional space as a plane with 4 sides. It is the simple solid known as the tetrahedron as we move into the Platonic solids because of its 4 faces, right? So we think of the 4 cardinal directions. We think of up, down, left, right. We think of north, south, east, west, right? And so it is a kind of dynamic cross in the ancient world. It signified fire, earth, air, water, solstices, equinox. And it appears in music as the 3rd overtone. So already even in music, we begin to see that these numeric patterns have a significance that is not just the creation of the human mind. They're actually, what's in the human mind is actually a reflection of what's out there in the world. And what's out there in the world is actually a reflection of the mind of God himself. Next, we move to 5. 5 relates, of course, to life itself. The quality of 5 seems to be very energetic. It marries male and female. Water itself is amazing liquid crystal with lattices of flexing icosahedra. And that being, of course, one of the 5 Platonic solids. Below, let's see, what we get from that is basically 5 triangles meeting at a point. You'll notice the symbol here beside my head. And on the most universal scale, the pentatonic scale, it is made of 5 tones grouped into 2 and 3. This was very prominent, for example, in the Renaissance. We think of the Vitruvian Man, right, of Leonardo. And in ancient metaphysics, it signified the aether, right? Whereas the 4 represented the 4 elements of fire, air, earth, and water. 5, of course, signifies the ether. The hexad, which is 6. 6 we see quite prominent in nature. The hexad, we think of things like snowflakes, certain chemical structures have a hexad structure to them. The 3 dimensions that make for 6 directions, backwards, forward, right? This is essentially the cube, because if you turn a cube on its point, it becomes a hexad. And so the hexad also applies to our dimension because there's only 6 different ways you can go. You can go up, down, forward, backward, left, right. If you read my analysis of 2001, you know that I included this aspect of the hexad in that analysis. We see a lot of crystalline structures, quartz, graphite, carbon atoms. They all have the same chemistry of the hexad. So again, a very fundamental aspect of reality. Honeycombs, again, another aspect of where hexads are prevalent in nature. 6 also has a relationship to man, and we know from Scripture 666, a triplicity of the number of the beast relating to Antichrist. 7, of course, is a number of perfection and rest. It is the 7th day of the week. It relates to the moon. A lot of lunar divisions are arranged in terms of 7s, lunar calendars. According to the ancient Indians, the vertical rainbow of 7 subtle energy centers or chakras relates to the body, energy points on the body. In the ancient world, there were 7 tones of a sister 5-tone scale. These are the white keys on the piano, producing the 7 modes of antiquity, a universal pattern. Moon's phases are in 4 7s, and then primary colors, red, green, blue, are used to combined to produce 4 more: yellow, cyan, magenta, and white. So there are 7 frieze symmetries, or 7 groups of crystal structures, and 7 coils in the traditional labyrinth. These are, of course, classic versions of the heptad. 8 is the pair of squares. So we're back to the 4s again. We see the 8 coming to prominence. The octahedron. This, obviously, Scripture, in terms of Scripture, relates to the 8th day, which is the first day of the week, or the day of resurrection, and signifies eternity. Within the architecture of the octagon, it often signifies the transition between heaven and earth. It's a bridge between the square and the circle. It's a spherical dome that often surmounts a cubic structure by way of an octagonal vault. So if I've ever been inside an Orthodox cathedral, you have a square cathedral and then a domed vault. Exactly what we're getting at here, because it signifies eternity. At the molecular level, this is displayed by atoms, which have a full octave of 8 electrons in their outermost shell. The sulfur atom has 6 electrons in its outermost shell, and so 8 atoms together to share electrons form an octagonal sulfur ring. Again, we see this all throughout nature consistently, all of these principles. The number of vertices of a cube, or the faces of its dual, is the octahedron, and it makes 8 complete. 8 is also revered in the Orient and the I Ching, where you have 8 coming up multiple times, the former heaven sequence. And as I mentioned, the biblical symbology. And that brings us to the curious number of 9, the ennead. Now, we know from a lot of comparative religious mythology, the ennead is, of course, a triad of triads, the first odd square of a number. And in the ennead, we have the ancient number pattern that was first spotted on the shell of a turtle in China. If you read my analysis of The Shining, you know I talked about that, the discovery of mathematical patterns in turtle shells in relation to certain tribes. 3 times 3 is more than just 2 times 2, and the ratio between 9 and 8 defines the crucial whole tone in music. There are 9 regular 3-dimensional shapes, the 5 Platonic solids, and the 4 stellar Kepler-Poinsot polyhedra. 9 appears in our bodies in the cross-section of the tentacle-like cilia, which moves things around our surfaces, and the bundles of the microtubes in the centrioles are central for cell division. 9 is the celestial number of order. Many traditions speak of 9 worlds, 9 spheres, and 9 levels of reality. Right? Again, the ennead. And then we come to 10. This, again, of course, relates to perfection. It relates to man, right? 10 fingers, 10 toes. 10 is particularly formed as the sum of the first 4 numbers. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. This had a profound significance to the Pythagoreans. It is immortalized again in the Tetractys of Pythagoras as it began this discussion. It is also called the universe, heaven, and eternity. It signifies perfection. Like 8, it signifies eternity. And it is a building of both 2- and 3-dimensional triangular forms. 10 is formed from 2 pentagons, and 10 life-invoking pentagons sit perfectly around a decagon. In other words, DNA appropriately is the key then to the reproduction of life. It has 10 steps for each turn of the double helix, and so it appears in cross sections as a 10-fold rosette. This is similar to the flower of life in terms of symbology as well. Again, in Gothic architecture or in the Kabbalistic tree, which is based on Platonism, 10 is important there. Plato believed that the decad contained all of the numbers. It was basically the way to have the one and the many all contained in one. Infinity and particularity all in one. And really for the Arabic numeral system as well, right? They're all numbers can be summarized and utilized from this first 10. So we went from unity to diversity, and then with 10, 1 plus 0 is 1. We're back to perfect unity. And this is not accidental. There's not an alternative number system where we can construct a whole bunch of other numbers that seem to work really well in the world. This is because the whole world is structured this way. Even your perspective, when you look out at the world and you look out at your field of vision, there's always only going to be left and right, up and down, backwards and forwards. There's always going to be 180 degrees to turn all the way around, and 180 degrees to turn forward to back, 360 to turn all the way around. And that applies going up as well as this way, right? So it's that way on purpose because it's all from the same mind. Check out my analyses at jaysanalysis.com. Subscribe below at the links, or go to Jay's Analysis, subscribe, and you can get my book, Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2. Thank you for watching.